Welcome to Neuro Revolution. The world was not designed for us, so we are creating a new one. Hear the stories of neurodivergent entrepreneurs, creatives, and changemakers. The rebel minds changing the world. Today, I am welcoming a good friend of mine, Erin Rainwood, who is a certified practitioner in applied neurology and somatics and the founder of Untethered Coaching. They are also a BSN, RN, yoga instructor, and parent. As a queer, non-binary, neurodivergent human with lived experience navigating ADHD, autism, complex trauma, brain injury, addiction, and disordered eating, they have firsthand knowledge of the profound transformation that somatic and neurological tools can provide. These practices have empowered them to build resilience and capacity beyond anything they once thought possible. And I'm excited for them to share more about what they have learned along this journey. So welcome, Erin.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe we could start with your journey. So what was your journey with neurodivergence?
I want to first say I love your podcast and I'm really honored to be here. And I had to take notes on how to answer questions about myself. That's part of the flavor of my neurodivergence. So what was my journey? I had a lot of struggles a lot of my life, and didn't realize until, dare I say, recently, that there was not just misdiagnosed things, but just completely undiagnosed things that were creating speed bumps and sometimes stop signs in the way of the direction that I knew I wanted to be going. So I, have had always a drive for self-inquiry and self-improvement. And I tried every avenue. I tried, talk therapy, CBT, you name it, I tried it because I wanted to be more whole. I wanted to be more authentically me and get out of my own way. And I just couldn't seem to get there. And so, in my 30s, I'm 40 now, but in my 30s, I was diagnosed with ADHD. And then in the last year or two, autism, and have gotten to explore what it's like to hold myself more gently and doing the research on what does that mean, not just identifying with the diagnosis, but what can it mean for how I hold myself. I also have history of brain injury, many a brain injury, lots of dopamine chasing and undiagnosed hypermobility, and just like completely disassociated from my body for a lot of years. It just led to a lot of injuries, a lot of fun, a lot of sports related fun, but a lot of injuries. And so I call this is my reclamation era. So where I'm just really reclaiming a relationship with my body that I don't know that I ever had. And so now it feels not easy, but definitely I feel like I can tackle the roller coaster that is my brain and body, and that is the ups and downs, ebbs and flows of life, with more ease. So, did I even answer the question?
Yeah,
I will go
absolutely.
on a tangent forever.
That's what we're here for, this conversation. And you just said a number of really powerful things like around your own journey. And thank you for being so willing to be open and vulnerable. And I'm sure we'll get to experience that as we move along. But that I feel like these conversations, for me, my hope is that it helps all of us to just become a little bit more neuro affirming, which is that sense, like you touched on, of being a little more gentle with ourselves, approaching it with curiosity. And I love too that with your your path, you were able to also have this different relationship or deeper relationship with your own body. And that can be something that's really hard for, like, I guess I'll give the example of like autistic folks, and I am one as well, right? That like our experience inside our body can be really, really overwhelming. Like the sensory experience of life can be overwhelming.
Right.
So,
Uh, and we find each other, don't we? Like when you
yeah,
look around, I think that should be one of the criterion of getting diagnosed is are all your friends on a spectrum? And if the answer is yes, then you might be like like that was the I think it was when I noticed that, my ex-girlfriend and my best friend, like everybody had a diagnosis, and I didn't want to just I remember fearing getting checked out for things that I really felt resonated with me because I'm like, what if I'm just, claiming something that uh, isn't mine, you know? So it took me a long time, even after I was aware I might have some things to look at. It took me a lot longer to get a formal diagnosis, and then a lot longer after that to really not identify with it, but identify the parts of me that have always needed to feel seen and heard that haven't. And so it didn't change, the getting of the letters from a doctor who's seen you once or twice. It really meant nothing and everything. It didn't change a thing in my life, and it changed everything. Having the formal diagnosis for me allowed me to let myself seek out the assistance and the support that really has been a game changer for me. So I have a specific ADHD and autism coach that I work with that is part family systems work and part not talk therapy per se, but just like really looking at how the beliefs became the beliefs, and how trauma has influenced them, and looking at the places that I have internalized ableism, which is everywhere. I think everybody has a bit of that. Sorry, that should have been a bit of a trigger warning. I'm going to say lots of things, um, but all of the places in which I still do have these unrealistic expectations of how I'm supposed to show up. And I think the best part of it was one time she asked, okay, how do you think a neurotypical person would have shown up in that situation? And it let me look at like, oh, we're all just human, and whatever the reason, we all have our struggles. We all have our places that we hope to be better and aren't yet. No matter where you fall on or off of any kind of um, neuro flavorful spectrum.
hmm. I love that you're saying that, you know, it came perhaps from like the diagnosis or like that sense of like being validated that this is my experience to maybe help inspire that permission giving for yourself to like receive the support, ask for the support, be okay with it. um,
Hmm.
and I mean, I really hope that we can just in general in our culture, in our world, be like allow ourselves to have our needs, whatever they are. But sometimes I mean, it can take something like this, right? Where when we have access to diagnosis, it can be a really powerful step toward
Yeah,
being more neuroaffirming to ourselves because we have this thing that says like, hey, yes, like yes. And so then internally I can say yes. So
right.
yeah.
And I realize that some of the even accessing of a formal diagnosis is privilege. I do have areas where I am definitely privileged in that I work in the medical field. So I already knew how to get myself to the right places, or eventually, um, and I knew a lot of the right questions to ask. I knew how to get insurance to cover these things, and so I definitely was lucky and privileged to have that kind of knowledge, and I recognize that not most people don't. And so, I encourage people to take advantage of There are like brain injury alliances out there. There are lots of affiliated groups that can provide free or very reasonably priced support to even get you to the place where you can. I've worked with like my ADHD coach is a social worker, and so not limiting yourself just to one physician that you can't get into for 2 years. Letting yourself, talk with, joining groups online, and finding a community, going to support groups, and just taking the stigma out of exploration of why do I function this way, and also not identifying too much with the diagnosis as your identity. So where a lot of the permissions that I've allowed myself to have now, maybe stemmed partially from a formal diagnosis, it's not the only thing. There's so much other work. I do this neurosomatic, it's applied neurology and somatic work that is working with the nervous system to build your capacity and your resilience. And so it's not just one thing. But I will say, like, letting yourself have permission to explore. I wonder why I function this way. And I wonder what steps I could take to support myself.
Yeah. One of the first steps towards that can be when we start looking at ourselves, even from a neutral place, or from like, if this wasn't wrong, how does that let me get a little more curious about it? Or if I wasn't wrong, how does that let
Yeah,
me get a little more curious about myself? That's
yeah,
just kind of something I'm hearing as well. And I know some other folks too on the previous episodes kind of talked about that a little bit, or just that sense of like, what if I'm not wrong? you
right.
know?
Well, and if we, I mean, I'm going to go a little bit into the neurosomatic aspect of it, is our nervous system and our brain and our body are always working to keep us safe. It's a matter of, are we accurately interpreting the data that we're taking in to know if we are actually safe or we are perceiving that we are unsafe in a safe situation. And so I won't get too much into the science of it, mostly because my flavor of neurodivergence, and combination of brain injury, um, a lot of times I need to have a reference in front of me to be able to accurately cite things. And so I tend to paraphrase unless I have I've co-working on a database with a fellow neurosomatic practitioner so that I can just go, oh, this client has this thing going on. I can filter out my database so that I recognize that the way my brain functions, I will likely never be able to just spout it off immediately. Um, but I can have all of the reference material around and very easily accessible so that I can still be the support that I want to be in the world, for myself and for others. I'm on a tangent, but
No,
with
I love that.
with the like with the getting out of your own way, your nervous system is constantly trying to answer the questions: Am I safe? Am I loved? And how can I actuate? How can I take action? And if your first answer is no, I'm not safe, whether you actually are or your nervous system has been trained since birth in some sort of way with your neurons firing together that this, you know, example, because you had a partner who mistreated you and left, that now your system has, one or many, your system has decided that being in relationship is unsafe. And it's your system's way of protecting. We all have our walls up in certain areas. And gosh, if we could look at that, not, oh gosh, I'll never date again. Oh, what's wrong with me? Why can't I get out of my own way? I'm so lonely, but yet I won't take the steps I need to not a fan of dating apps, but like they work. They do work. But like instead of judging yourself for the ways in which you quote unquote get in your way, what if it's an approach, and this for me took neurosomatic tools to support my nervous system to even be able to have this approach. So resourcing myself and giving myself the proper fuel, whether it be, through food or oxygenation or whatever kind of information that my nervous system needed, to be able to say, what if my nervous system is doing what it can to keep me safe? And thank you so much, but this information isn't accurate. And so how do I get to a place where I can receive, yeah, that past relationship was not safe, but that does not mean, nervous system, thank you so much for trying to protect me. I appreciate you. That all relationships are not safe, and so being able to explore those questions and, stay curious with why we're functioning the way we do, it does, it does take some resourcing. It takes some fuel. It takes, um, putting a bit of effort in on the foundation level of this so that when it's time to, need to expend energy on being in a relationship or on going on a first date or something, like whatever the example is, that you have that. Your threat bucket is low enough that adding a little threat, which could be a new situation, it could be joy. We're so comfortable being uncomfortable. Like there's lots of ways in which our system interprets threat, and it's not always from a bad thing per se.
Yeah.
So,
I think that makes a lot of sense about what you're saying around the interpretation from our nervous system. Like we're getting information, but how are we actually interpreting it? How is our nervous system interpreting it?
right,
And what is being sort of triggered or going on with inside with that information? So
right.
maybe we can sort of um, pull back to like what is neurosomatic work or like
hmm
applied
hmm
neurology and somatics. Like maybe we could start
Yeah,
there. And then I love what you
yeah,
were touching on about resourcing because I'm sure that would be really powerful to talk about in regard to like that sounds like it's kind of like the first step, right? So
yeah,
within this work. So
yeah. I mean, thank you for. I will forever start in the middle of a conversation and never finish a thought or a sentence, and I have come to a place to just be at peace with that. And the people that are around me, if they want to direct me back, that's great. And sometimes I have ways to direct myself back, but that's another level of this. Yeah, I I am a little puppy dog and I chase the shiniest new thought. So, neurosomatic intelligence is the certification program that I went through. I found them through a podcast, Trauma Rewired,
great podcast.
and it is. My therapist actually recommended the podcast, and I just fell in love with the approach, and the gentleness and the honesty, and what they were talking about on this podcast. Almost every episode, something resonated deep within me, and I found them at a time when I was very low. I was um, really. I've known since I was in nursing school that I didn't want to be a nurse. But I followed my path the way a good little Midwesterner does. Uh, and I didn't know, I knew I wanted something else, and I didn't know what it was. And then when I came across this, I was like, this is exactly the thing. I had never felt something call to me this much. And so I got myself into the program. And I'm going to answer the question, I promise.
No, please. Yeah. We're along for
uh,
the ride.
Okay. Uh, I got myself into the program, and I will just say, the podcast markets itself to a group of people that are often neuroflavorful. They have a history of trauma, a lot of times complex trauma, um, you know, learning disability, history of addiction. The people that are finding this podcast are the ones who have been already battling to find themselves. And that's usually the people that are fine. I mean, I don't want to speak for the whole audience of the podcast, but I will say, like, for me, I came into that under resourced by far.
Mm-hmm.
And so trying to add on this program while very much the subject matter that I wanted to be studying was so threatening to my system that, like, all of my symptoms, panic attack and anxiety and just bodily pain, these, we call them outputs, um, these symptoms of a system that is overloaded were more. And I was like, I came to this program because I wanted to get better and I wanted to help other people, but um, and And so the founder of the company, Elizabeth, had a couple of very heartfelt and honest and down to earth talks with me about potentially slowing down, going at a different pace than the others, seeking some support outside. I got my own private neurosomatic coach to help me through. I ended up having to repeat the program, and I didn't get my certification till the second time through, about halfway through. But what it did for me was it let me start to get creative. It let me start to go, okay, you know what? I might learn at a different pace. There's been masking my whole life. But the tools themselves, when scaled back for my beautifully special system, when I was able to find the correct tools for myself, a lot of them are tools that decrease the stimulation that comes in, decrease the information that come in. So for those of you that are watching, I have color glasses. I have a couple different colors. I have my whole little bag of goodies. I didn't know in the beginning that I needed less stimulation, not more. And so once I figured that out and once I started working with someone one-on-one, I was able to really specialize the tools that I was using to support myself the best. And that was where things really began to turn to a different level of showing up for myself and in the world. So Neurosomatic, to answer the question, it is a series of tools that you work within your body, within your nervous system, that you can do. A lot of them you can do them, I call them my stealthy tools, where people don't even know I'm doing them. I've been doing them the whole time. I have like sensory stimulation with a squishmallow that I'm over here just running my hands along. They're tools to change or increase or decrease the amount or the type of stimulus that comes into your system to give your nervous system the thing that it needs to support it to know that there is less threat in these situations and to help rehab deficits that you might have. So if you have a vision deficit, you're going to have as long as you're using your vision every day, there's going to be an increased level of threat. The same thing for most people, they're walking around hyperventilating. So if you're not taking enough deep breaths, you're not getting enough oxygen to the areas of your brain that help you make good decisions. I say good, and I hate good and bad. So when I say good, I mean the type of decisions that correlate to your core value system. So we all know when we are under-resourced, which my definition of that is like, I think of it like my nervous system's immune system. like when I am down and out, I am going to make less intelligent, less supportive decisions towards where I want to be going. And so it's a series of rehabbing deficits, increasing positive information so that you can build a foundation of trust and start to, for those of us, all of us, who were not brought up in a household. I don't want to speak for everyone, but many of the people I know in my life and meet with and my clients were not taught from day one to trust and to hone their intuition, and their body's signals were not only not taught to be noticed, but they were taught to be completely ignored. And if your body's doing this thing, or if you're feeling a certain way, suck it up, buttercup. And so the working with the nervous system was the key element that has been a contribution to all the other work I was already doing. So, talk therapy, group work, self-work, healthy eating, the things that are in the people read magazines anymore, do they? All the suggestions for the self-help book aisle at the library. This was the key missing element for me that helped put it all together and really helped me for once and for all get out of my own way. And I'm not saying this as a sales pitch that this will heal you, that this will fix you, because I don't think that we are broken. But I am saying that if you're trying to drive a car, putting gas in it helps, unless it's electric.
You're like the analogy.
So right, I will always use an analogy, but it may not be accurate. But like this was the thing that I needed to help enhance all the other skills that I was building. So being a nurse, being a parent, being a yoga instructor, I work in like aerial arts and acrobat. Used to be an acrobat, but like lots of lots of things that were built to help support me get where I needed to go. But this was the thing that it's the bread and butter. It's the thing that changed it all. And so, yeah, I want to do this. I want to teach this. I want to share this. Um, that was a long tangent. What you got?
I I just want to
I
say
answered the question
first,
eventually.
well, all of it's really relevant because I just wanted to say I really appreciate how carefully, and I mean to like care dash fully, how much care you brought to your like explanation, description, defining of this. And because like, I think sometimes we may approach nervous system regulation work, which I feel like is a term people are using more now, from a place of trying to get ourselves to stop feeling an emotion or to like
Right,
shift something so I can
right.
just keep going on with life, even though there might be elements in our life that is actually impacting our nervous system that maybe it's telling us about.
Right.
Well, maybe we should be curious, but like, okay, so I feel like sometimes that's the approach, but the way you were describing it was so much deeper, like really involving this self trust,
Yeah.
this like building of resources, this not making anything wrong that your nervous system is trying to communicate to you, or even
Yeah.
how it's trying to communicate to you, but like becoming really present with that. Do you want to speak a little bit about that? I don't know. I feel
Yeah.
like I should have
Well,
a
and I
question,
think
but
no, that was a question because I think one of the common assumptions is that if and I am guilty of this, like this was me, that if we have a regulated nervous system, we won't get irritable or angry or sad or upset or have insomnia. And what I want to say to that is that we are constantly regulating, no matter what state we're in. And so, what the tools have helped me do, and what I strive to help my clients with, is not trying to make our system feel safe in a situation that isn't safe, but trying to enhance the accuracy of the information that we are taking in so that we can, and then resource ourselves so that we can better decide what we want to do with that information. And for me, what that looks like in real life, IRL, I had someone ask me today, what does that mean? What that looks like in real life for me is not necessarily huge things, sometimes very subtle, but it looks like being able to hold myself gently when I am dysregulated and verbalize it to my loved ones so that I am not projecting um, this state that I'm in onto others. Hey, I just want to let you know, I noticed that I'm feeling a bit crunchy is a word I like to use. I'm feeling a bit crunchy right now. I am going to, XYZ for myself. I'm gonna get some fuel, some food into my system because a lot of times my neurodivergence is like I forget to eat and then I'm like, oh, this again. Like, so cumbersome. Uh, uh, but to be able to not only recognize it sooner or catch it earlier, but then not make it wrong and lessen the confusion about what's going on. Oh, hey, I'm noticing like my feet and hands are cold and I feel a little nauseous. Sometimes I get a little headache. These are the some of the symptoms of dysregulation for me. And notice that like when I want to speak with someone, I feel like I want to throat punch them and I'm not sure why. They're not doing anything wrong. They just were in the room with me. and, and so like not I'm theoretically, but like irritability for me has always been a point of contention because I have this fear of ever negatively impacting someone else, knowingly or unknowingly. But for me, it looks like, oh, what might I need in this situation? A, let me just say it out loud. Hey, I'm feeling dysregulated. This is not about you. Everyone in the room, this is about me. It doesn't necessarily mean that's going to prevent me from interacting with them in a way that I'm not proud of, but I can start it there. And then I can go, okay, do I need to eat? Have I drank water recently? Did I forget to take my ADHD meds this morning? What's my sleep been like? And sometimes for me, it's just, hey, I'm gonna go do some neurosomatic tools in the room for 5 minutes. I'll be right back. And not calling that selfish, not calling that abandoning the ones I love, calling that self-caring, but not from a place of I need to change this, more of a place of I have the resources now for this to not be scary to be with. Because often we fear looking at that thing that dysregulates us for fear that it'll just swallow us whole. And as I explore how to process, we have a term minimum effective dose. So I am constantly practicing, not constantly, I am often practicing minimum effective dose processing of emotions at times when I'm not already dysregulated, so that I will have the tool, I will have the muscle memory to know what to do at the times when I am. So it's kind of like, if you're, let's get a metaphor in there because, I love them. Like if you're training for a marathon, you're going to go out for runs regularly. And you're probably going to do it at times when you don't really feel like it. You're probably going to have a time frame that your goal is, and it is for the big day, so that when you have that big day, you know what shoes you're wearing. You know what kind of nourishment you need. You know about how long it's going to take, and you know what you're going to feel like afterwards. And so for me, I do that with the emotional processing so that at the moments where I'm caught off guard, I'm like, oh, okay, I know what to do here. And if I don't, guess what? My little neurospicy brain, I got it posted on a whiteboard. I got it posted on my ceiling fan. I got it on my refrigerator. I personally need visual cues. Not for things that I forget, it's the things I forget in the moment. So when I'm dysregulated, um, I forget that I have anyone else in my life that I could call on a phone. I forget that I might need to eat a food. So I have these visual cues for me to help me, okay, something's off. Let me check the list. Are any of these things influencing me? Um, I don't even remember what the question was.
I love that so much. And and I also really appreciate something you said in there. It made me, I want to sort of like rewind to something I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
talking about how like, we have sometimes people look to nervous system regulation tools to get away from emotions. And I don't want to make
yeah,
light of that. I might have, so I apologize. But I like what you said about it because the clarification around that can just be indicating that we don't feel safe, right? So that
yeah,
just can be
yeah,
that could be indicating like, hey, if I feel like I need to get away from this experience, maybe that could be an indicator that if I had that I could use more resources with this to even
yeah,
figure out, because like you were saying the last bit too around like what does it actually look like having done the tools that help with the processing of emotions or being with these things that you're talking about, that it gives you in those moments when you're caught off guard, like, okay, I
yeah,
have like a map now, I have like a plan,
yeah,
or I have tools, or even I put it up around if I can't remember. And
yeah,
I just love how like very like practical it is. And I love too that you said like it might not look like big things, but that is huge on like a daily
yeah,
lived experience to have even just
yeah,
a little more ease with ourselves and our nervous systems and our emotions. And like especially as life gets stressful, like how amazing is it to be able
right.
to navigate that even just with a little bit more ease.
And that's part of for me, a daily practice. I even had to, like in the neurosomatic world, they encourage you to have a daily practice, which was very difficult for me as someone who both loves and hates routine. The ADHD and the autism fight each other within me, and it's a beautiful battle royale daily. And what I had to get to is that I will have a routine, and my routine will look different every day. But I carry my little bag of tools around me all over the house, and I have them stashed in my car, and I have notes all over. I have, wherever I am, I have a visual reminder, hey, you might want to do a tool. And for now, that is enough routine for me to let myself off the hook of being perfect about the routine. And it is working. And so even the allowance to let the prescription for my nervous system look very different. And that's part of the work that I want to do is with other people with complex trauma and with neurodiverse life experience is, hey, let's find what would work for you specifically out of all this knowledge, out of this training that I have received that works very well for a lot of people. It didn't for me. And so I had to get very creative, which is a thing I am good at, and be like, how can I hack the system to make this as easy and simple and accessible as possible because I won't do it otherwise. And then that will be the thing that helps me build capacity to be able to get to more. But to the extent of emotional regulation is that I think we all have had that experience of if I touch the scary thing, if I lean in, if I'm starting to feel the bubbling up of whatever it is, I don't even know what it is, and we often don't. If I touch it, it will envelop me. And we've all had those days where we did touch it. We couldn't not. It touched us. uh, and then you're in it for hours and then you have like the emotional hangover after, and that was my life experience. I mean, hours, weeks, lots of I haven't had a single longer than a few hour episode of depression since beginning this work. I've been sober for over a year. I have the support in my life. I have relational intimacy. I have started a business, and I am doing the things that I knew I wanted, and I am being who I wanted. I am getting out of my own way, and it's uncomfortable. I want to cuss. I want to say cuss words about it right now, but it's the discomfort that I want. This is the discomfort I would love to be tackling. And we're so used to the discomfort that we were just stuck with, that we were born into, that we adopted from our parents and our family and our teachers and the society and everyone that my favorite metaphor of like, when you're born, you're given this backpack and everyone starts packing it for you. Your parents put their stuff from their childhood, which definitely came from their parents' childhood, just a little generational trauma stuck in there, and then you've got all the pressures from society, and who knows if you were, maybe born female. Not saying that people born any other gender are not struggling in their own ways, but these prescriptions for how we are allowed and supposed to show up and for what makes us lovable, for what makes us worthy of love in this world from ourselves and from others. And they just fill your backpack up, and then we're just supposed to walk around and pretend like it's not heavy and constantly be telling ourselves, yeah, this belongs to me, and opening it and not recognizing any of it, but you're like, oh, well, it's familiar at least. And this is the work of this neurosomatic training is to slowly and safer. I'm stealing this from Piper Rose, who is a neurosomatic coach. I love the concept of nothing that we do is safe. It's all, context, and it's all perception, but safer with a lowercase r. So we're building our resilience and our capacity to be able to take a thing out of the book bag once in a while and examine it. And when you lighten your load a bit, then when those big emotions hit and they bubble up and you go, what is this? And you touch it, it might feel heavy and deep, but it is holdable.
Hmm.
It can be held, and um, and you can move on with your day and your life going, okay, yeah, that was big, that was scary, but I knew how to be. I knew that I could call someone. Like part of my resilience training is being allowed to call someone. And my very good friend Jenny Lee, once said to me when I was having a day and I told myself I was allowed to call a friend when I was, a lot of my permission giving to myself is that I am allowed to be a destructive mess of self and call a friend anyway, and that's not being a burden, that's being a human. And you said to me, I said, I'm doing all this work. I'm I'm doing it all. I'm taking all the steps. Why isn't it working? Why do I feel like this? And I know everyone that it might be listening is like that like I don't want to feel like this. And you said maybe it feels like this not because it isn't working, but because it is. And I will tell you, I have had so many times where that phrase comes into my mind when I'm feeling big things and they feel scary and I'm like, I don't want this. I don't want to feel this. And I'm like, oh, I can now. Things from my past are coming back and they're heavy and they're big and they're really scary. And I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life. And I am the most supported and the most uh, resilient that I've ever been. And it doesn't mean there aren't ups and downs. It just means I can handle them. And gosh, I want to be a part of others' journey that gives them even 1% of that. Because we're all just out there doing our best.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Like, and I think too that sense around like maybe it feels that big because it is working is that sense of like when those big things come up and maybe we haven't experienced that version of it or that depth of it. I guess I was kind of referencing the sense of like because your nervous system and your inner self trusts you to be able to hold this now, you
Yeah,
know, and that
yeah,
can be a really powerful like shifting because it's like you're
yeah,
saying like it makes total sense to be like this must mean that this isn't working and like why is it getting bigger, you know.
yeah,
And I love just kind of that little reframe of like I remember that conversation. I remember
yeah,
how like just that it really changed the moment of it. And I think
yeah,
too it's this beautiful like self perspective of self compassion. I'm just being like, oh,
right,
because I'm like my other way of looking at it means that I'm doing it wrong. I'm like I'm wrong or
yeah,
something. And this one is like, oh,
right,
I've been doing something that's actually really helpful. And it's
right,
allowing the space for something that was
right,
already inside of me to become more apparent. That's because I'm processing it. Doesn't mean
yeah,
it's just going to stay there in that moment with that intensity. Like, right? Because you're not
right,
experiencing that now. That was a while
right.
ago.
Well, right, and that was, and what I specifically remember was that was related to speaking up in a medical situation to somebody who was um, being disrespectful of my pronouns and wasn't accommodating my neurodivergence. Me saying, "Hey, I'm autistic." When I say I don't understand something, it's not from a place of seeking to stimulate you to be defensive. It just means I don't understand. And asking for clarity is a thing I'm going to need to be allowed to do safely. And I had a very big emotional reaction after that because, and I remember talking to you because it was that, like in a movie reel that it plays like all these past things.
Yeah.
It was all of a sudden every single time in my life when I had asked for clarity and was met with defensiveness and was met with people taking my honest seeking of more information as an affront, as a ego poke, and it was just a big thing to carry. And I am so glad that I have you in my life to help hold that. And I'm so glad that I let myself call people now. That I
Yeah.
didn't. I am letting go slowly, slowly of my hyper independent tendencies because it was all just a defense mechanism anyway. From my girlfriend and I have a phrase. We're going to make a T-shirt that says "childhood trauma?" ? of like it is from a place of, for much of my life, dare say I, the whole thing, um, I felt like a burden. I felt like I was too sensitive. I was told straight up, that I was too sensitive. Get it together, pull it together, like don't be too much. And if you are, you're the problem. It's not society. Oh, I'm gonna terribly misquote something, but it's profound for me. So we'll see if I can get to it. Um, and I will have to look in the thing to, I don't even remember who says it. It's like it is no measure of health to be profoundly um,
Mm,
well adjusted to a sick society.
I think that's Gabor
Uh,
Mate, but I'm not totally sure.
Gabor Mate, yes,
Yeah,
yes,
Gabor.
thank you. But thank you for that. It's one of those, like, we internalize as children, and that's part of the work I do with complex trauma, with the nervous system, is we we as children internalize, because our caregiver is our safety, we internalize that it must be us that's wrong, because if we allow ourselves to know that this thing is not safe, then that threatens our life, our livelihood. They are keeping us very much alive. Um, and then that just, it carries into adulthood where we just decide, we didn't decide, but our neurons wired together that we must be the problem. So let's, all the self-help in the world is not going to fix the fact that we have a society that says that all bodies aren't okay and all gender identity isn't okay. And all this messaging that we are not perfectly enough, because how would they be able to sell to us? That's the consumerism of it, is if someone is very content with who they are and what they look like, you can't sell them a darn thing. I don't know if we're allowed to cuss on this pod. you know. So you they're not going to need of products if they're enough already. So we have to create this, we have created this society where we're constantly telling people, if you just get this eye cream, if you just wear this shirt, then and only then will you be enough and lovable. Um, and I'm here to break down the system. I'm here to, you know, just take apart one by one ableism and consumerism, and it starts with me. So I am committed to modeling this first and foremost.
It starts with me. Yes. I just love that so much, and especially with working with the nervous system. I read this book once. I think it was for counselors, but it said something about the limbic system and how it works, and that like when you're working with somebody else, basically it was kind of posing that you can only go so far as that person has, because you're kind of on some level other than just our like conscious mind. We're referencing something off of them. And so I was so love that you're leading this work within yourself, because that's such an important aspect of this.
Well, I mean, there's very real science to back up mirror neurons and
Yeah,
co-regulation, and I'm watching it in my own life. I watch, when I am regulated, my whole household is regulated, and when I am dysregulated, boy, I can be a bit of a velvet bulldozer, um, and I'm starting to just be okay with, yeah, you know what? And the people in my life that love me signed up to, move aside if there's a bulldozer in the room. And and I'm still lovable. I could be like an adorable cartoon velvet bulldozer. It's one of those, like, I am slowly but surely learning that I am lovable as I am as a whole person, and doing the work for me helps me bleed less on others. Like, we are constantly in every interaction that you have with someone, whether it be on a virtual platform, in person, the person that you held the door for at the bank, whatever, every interaction that you have with someone, you are affecting their nervous system. And we can either spread crap, I wanted to say, we can spread crap, or we can spread joy and attunement and regulation. But regardless, we are spreading. So it's not about coming to this from a level of perfectionism. It's about saying like, I more frequently would like to be a source of joy in the world. I more frequently would like to be the person on hold with the customer service person who is a little bit nicer. If I can do one thing today well, I will say please and thank you more often, and just really bringing that bar down low so that A, it's attainable, with gentleness for where we are in ourselves. But as we do that out in the world, I think it's both. It's the chicken and the egg. As we do it for ourselves, we can do it more out in the world. And as we do it out in the world and we get it back because we are co-regulating with others, then we can do it more for ourselves. But yeah, that inner critic is strong, and that's a lot of work that I do with clients. Is it's one of the biggest things is the inner critic, and it's with myself as well. Even for this podcast, of why do I deserve to come on this and have my voice be heard, and who these questions, and I will just say like that's not mine, and that voice was put there. It's stuck in my backpack, um, to help keep me small and out of the way. And I refuse to be small anymore, but I will not be large from a place of proving. I will be large from a place of I don't have to change everyone and everything around me, but I, in my little corner of the world, can plant a few more seeds,
Hmm.
and I can water those and let that be the ripple. I'm not ever going to be an activist who's like running the biggest groups or, like uh, internationally known, but I absolutely can change my corner of the world a little bit for
Hmm.
the people that want it, you know?
Something I've experienced with like personal development, healing work. There's this thing that happens where I think we often, or at least I, would approach it from a sense of like, okay, if I have the formula, then I can sort of do better, right?
Yeah,
But what has happened at least is it's like the one of the first steps is allowing myself to be more human, not more perfect.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
I might be approaching it so I could become more perfect. That might be my initial motivation, but what really happens is that it sort of breaks down that idea that we have in our mind that that's where we need to be, rather than more human,
yeah,
more okay with I'm going to be messy,
yeah,
and it can feel really weird because that's not what we thought was going to happen.
right. Yeah, it's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it looks like things like I'm reading. I'm always reading like 5 books at once, and by reading I mean listening to. Don't you even think that I read with my eyes very often. That is that is not my brain's way. But Perfectionist Guide to Letting Go is one that my ADHD coach recommended, and I love it. I'm always on a book and 5 others, and but it is like showing up. I mean, it's these things like showing up on this podcast where I was a little bit I didn't sleep well, and I was a little nervous about what my energy level would be at this time of day, and doing it anyway and supporting myself in the ways that I needed. So I didn't just come on here willy-nilly. Like I spent a good, 20 minutes doing some tools. And you don't have to do 20 minutes. You can literally do a half a minute, and it can change your nervous system. The change within the nervous system is system wide. So you can do, one little combination of tools that takes you 10 seconds, and it can enact a difference, a change. But I fueled myself. I gave my back brain, my limbic, and my frontal lobe a little bit more fuel, with sugar, sodium, potassium, and some breathing techniques to increase the oxygen in my blood. And I gave myself permission to show up as I am today, right now, because ultimately I don't want to show up perfect. I want to show up human, because that's what's going to be the thing that invites other people to know you don't have to. We're all out there comparing ourselves to other people, but what if we just got to compare ourselves to us? And if you're a little bit more present in this moment, it's a win,
Mm.
and if I come on here and I stumble over my words more than I would prefer, then it's a win because other people that are listening to this probably do that also. So I don't have to show up with all of the perfect working memory and executive function that I don't have. um, and I don't have to have all the perfect explanations. I don't have to answer the questions in order linearly or not go on tangents. I can just show up as me, and whoever's drawn to that will be, and whoever's not, that's great. I say like I'm not everyone's cup of tea, and some people drink coffee. So, and that's okay. Like that's the permission that we never were taught to give ourselves, is that we aren't for everyone, and that doesn't mean anything about us.
Yeah,
Nothing.
that's huge. Yeah, that's. I wanna. Do want to take 1 second here just to ask your
Yeah.
permission because around if we have some more time. Normally,
Yeah.
I like to really keep this at 60 minutes or right around there to respect your time.
Hmm.
I have more
Yeah.
questions. Would it be okay if we
Yeah.
go over a little bit? Um,
Absolutely.
okay. Is there like a definitely not more than this much over?
Um, Maybe we can stick with like 10, 15 minutes, just
Okay.
single parent life.
Yes. Perfect. Okay. And now after I said that, I'm like, what was I gonna ask? Oh, the first one was, um, do you have like a simple tool that maybe you could like help us all learn in
Yeah,
this moment,
I'm
so
doing
we
it
can
right now.
practice? Yeah.
I thought about it before we came on because you had mentioned maybe do a tool, and I was overthinking it as I do. And I was like, you know what's going to happen? I'm going to be teaching whichever one I'm doing at the time. Um, so my favorite as a very simple base tool, there are lots of ways to assess where your nervous system is at and reassess afterwards. I'm going to keep it super duper simple here. And I'm just going to say do some sensory stimulus. And what that means, what that can look like is almost anything. Like for me as a autistic person, light touch has in the past been very difficult and it feels gross. It's like the reaction to the light touch is the same as like if I sneeze, like it's involuntary. It feels like to withdraw. However, what I've noticed is when I started this, I had to do very rough touch. So I use a dry brush. If anybody is watching, I have like little dry brush things. And I had to use one with like kind of rougher horsehair or, to be able to tolerate the sensory touch. Now I'm using a little makeup brush. And, if I'm in the car, if I'm laying down, if I just don't want to move, I'll use the sleeve of my
Yeah.
shirt. Um,
Yeah.
and so
Okay.
there are lots of very specific tools that are aimed at very specific outcomes. I'm just going to keep it really simple. If you have nothing around, you can just rub your hands together and you can just say to yourself, like, these are my hands, this is my body. So giving yourself a little bit of sensory stimulus on your hands. These are my hands, this is my body. If you feel like closing your eyes, you can do that. And that's one that I will do. It's almost like washing your hands, but without the water. To come back into my body, to get grounded, to get a little bit more present if I feel like myself is, if I feel disassociated at all. But what I've been doing throughout this interview is just doing a little light touch on one hand or the other. So something that is not skin on skin, you can use, the sleeve of your shirt. You can use. I often like to just pet a squishmallow, but the technique here that I generally do, not well in interviews, is I will close my eyes if it feels safe and comfortable, and I will just try to picture. So I'll show you on the camera. I will picture in my head what it is that I'm touching. So I'll kind of, and if you're the kind of person, my girlfriend can't make pictures in her head, you can say the words.
Hmm.
So you can say,
And just to
you can
describe
say it.
this, Erin is holding
Yeah,
the
makeup brush in
makeup
one
brush.
hand,
Yeah.
and then I'm just lightly caressing the hand, the opposite hand. And you can use literally anything that feels good to you sensory wise. So you can use a hairbrush, you can use a nice soft cloth, um, whatever's nearby that you want to experiment with. I advise you, experiment with cold or hot. I do this in the shower. I use a loofah, and I just say in my mind or out loud, this is my left hand. This is my left hand. And you can get more detailed with it. Um, you can say, like, this is my left thumb. But for me, where I'm at and where I like to do, keep it simple, is this is my left hand. This is my left hand. And I say it and I picture it. And I touch base of where am I touching? What does that sensation feel like? Are there areas that have more or less sensation? And if there are areas that maybe need a little bit extra stimulus, stay there for a little bit longer. And this is a tool that not only helps with what we call interoception, which is like being in your body safely, little bits at a time, because it's not something that we all feel really good about. For somebody that has had chronic pain most of my adult life, it can get very scary in there, in this body of mine. So this is a really, really low threat tool to help know what it feels like to be in your body, to help bring you back into your body. It also helps with like boundary setting, because knowing where your hand begins and where your wrist and your hand are different. So like where your hand stops and your wrist begins is what I'm trying to say. So setting a body map in your mind, a more accurate body map of where your hand stops and your wrist begins, is going to translate into your relationships as where your body autonomy ends and theirs begins. So it's a really cool tool. I start with the feet. I do it with the loofah in the shower. Really get creative with.
Yeah. I just wanted
It's
to
one of
mention
my
one thing.
favorite tools. Yeah,
I
go.
love that. Oh, I just want to mention one, like what part of the logic of starting with the feet is that it's farther away from like your core, right? So there's like an
Yeah.
element of like it can feel safer for your nervous system to start like farther away, maybe from like your core or something. Is that right?
So there
Or maybe
there
it's like,
are a couple different. Yes, that absolutely right. Um, it tends to be for most people, and I say that with the caveat of we are all very different and unique, and to start further away from the head and the brain because it is less threatening. However, if you find that touching your feet is not feeling good or it
right.
feels
Yes.
threatening, or it's, you know, notice things. I won't go into too much detail, but if you notice as you're doing this tool, you are feeling more tension in your body, or you're feeling, a headache coming on, or you're feeling dry mouth, or you're just starting to feel like different in a way that doesn't feel good. There's a lot of different things it can mean, but I will say first, take a break, you know, shake it out, and you can return to that with less intensity or less amount of time later. You can try a different part of the body. Um, but there are, they have this phrase of like there are bottom up people and there are top down people, which is essentially some people like to do tools that are more movement based, and some like to do ones that are more like cognitive based. Um, and depending on where they start, closer to the brain or further away. That said, none of that really applies for this. I would encourage you to experiment, go slow, do it for small amounts of time with very low intensity as you start, and see, how you feel afterwards. And hire me to be your coach, and I'll teach you all the ways that we can work very, very specifically with your unique nervous system. And we can like really cater and hone these tools to be exactly the information that your beautiful nervous system, all in its own, needs for you. So,
I love that. I love it because you don't have to do it
shameless
alone.
plug.
Well, as you should. I was gonna like, I always ask people at the end, like, how do people connect with you? What's coming up with your project? So, untethered coaching. Tell us
Yeah,
a little bit about like how folks can connect with you. Where do we find you? I will
yeah,
have all the links in the description, but I always like people just to say it as well.
yeah. So I am an applied neurology and somatics coach, in addition to many other hats that I wear. And I bring often some of these other, energy work and yoga type modalities in my repertoire into the neurosomatic work. But essentially, um, I think a great place to start, not the only place to start, is with one-on-one coaching because it can be very specifically uh, catered to exactly the needs that you have and the goals that you have. My website is untetheredcoachingllc.com, and I am the same on socials, Untethered Coaching LLC. on Instagram, and email is untetheredcoachingllc@gmail.com. If you just go to the website, that's all on there as well. And please feel free to reach out. Email is probably going to be the easiest and fastest. And also check out Trauma Rewired is the podcast that got me hooked on this work. And the training program that I went through is Neurosomatic Intelligence certification program. And, even if it's just, you want to have a quick call to discuss if this would be something that would work for you, I'm absolutely happy to do that. And I work on sliding scale fee because I want to make sure that this kind of work is accessible to all. Right now, I don't take insurance, but I want to make this accessible. So that's my goal. So please do not let finances be a reason to not reach out.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on here. Thank you for doing the work that you do. And thank you for
Yeah.
being this in the world. Really, really
Well, thank
appreciate
you for
you.
having me. Thank you for inviting me onto this beautiful podcast. What a wonderful creation. What a gift to the world.
Aw,
We need more neurodivergent support in these times and always, but